Hey guys, before we start the podcast, I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who has been downloading and listening to Quit Happens. I just checked and we're at almost 1,000 downloads, so thank you very, very, very much for all your support. Now, if you like what you hear and you have just an extra second in your day to tap on some stars or leave a review, that would be a great way for other people who could benefit from some strategic quitting to find out about our little podcast. And I would greatly appreciate that as well. Okay, on with the show.
Winners never quit, and quitters never win.
Quitters win all the time. Let us show you how on Quit Happens.
Hey everyone, Lynn Marie here. Happy 13th episode. So maybe that's not a big deal to anybody but me, but 13 is my favorite number. I was born on the 13th. I look forward to the 13th of every month. So to celebrate the 13th episode, you will notice there is no guest. I am instead going to be addressing some of the fears some of you may have surrounding quitting. And I have titled this episode Triskaidekaphobia and How to Quit Fearing Your Quitting Fears, which is an extreme mouthful, but let me explain. Triskaidekaphobia, if you didn't know, is fear of the number 13. So why do I bring up Triskaidekaphobia? Well, it's very emblematic of many of the fears we have around quitting, in that it's a fear of something that's almost entirely a product of our own minds. For example, you may think, oh, let's avoid number 13, or let's avoid walking under that ladder, or whatever other superstitious belief. And there's really no consequence either way that you know of. It's generally all kind of a story wrapped up in our heads, right? Let me explain what this has to do with quitting. If you're about to quit a job and you fear that you won't have sufficient income, that is a concrete fear. You fear you're going to lose your health insurance, something like that. Totally concrete fear. You may not have a sufficient income, and that could lead to some real changes in your circumstances, like having to move or get a different job or having to go out and purchase your own health insurance. However, a lot of the fears we have surrounding quits are much more esoteric, kind of like our fears surrounding superstitions. So you'll note here that I didn't say they were less valid, because I'm never going to say your fears are not valid. I am not here to invalidate any fear, just to help dispel them. So let's examine some of those fears. First up is one of my favorites to address. It is the fear of what people are going to think if you quit. Now, this falls into a few categories. First off, if you were quitting something that seems very prestigious, like, for example, I was in sports medicine at some point, which would have been many people's dream job. And you may have been in that same position where you're in a job that a lot of people would love to have, but it's not working for you. So what are people going to think if you quit that dream job? That's one side. The other side is you're in a job that may be kind of hard and not necessarily that glorious or glamorous, and you're afraid people are going to think you can't hack it if you quit. Now, either camp you're in, just like with the fears I was talking about a few minutes ago, these are entirely in your head, in that they're not necessarily going to have a tangible effect outside of your thought process. And again, doesn't mean they're invalid. It actually just means they're easier to combat. It's not like trying to come up with some more income or trying to find health insurance out of nowhere. This is just about reevaluating what you're actually afraid of. So if you're afraid of what people are going to think, let's stop and examine what are they going to think? Put yourself in those other people's shoes for a minute. Take yourself out of the position of the quitter and put yourself in your position of the best friend of somebody who's going to quit. You say your friend came over to tell you, man, my job is just too much. Either in that second camp, it's just too hard. I have been grinding away. I can't take it anymore. Or, hey, I know I should probably love this job, but I don't. What would you say to your best friend? What would you think at that point? Would you think, wow, what a quitter, what a silly move to make? Probably not. If you care about them and you want to support them, you probably think, wow, this job's having a real toll on them. I'm glad they've realized that maybe they should make a change. And that's what most people who care about you are going to think about your quit. And as I've said before, and will say a million times again, anybody who doesn't think that about your quit is probably not somebody whose opinion you need to concern yourself with in the first place, right? Anybody who doesn't have your best interest in mind, it's probably not great to base your future decisions on what they may or may not be thinking. Now put yourself back in those shoes for a minute of listening to your best friend talking about their potential quit. When they go back to their house after chit-chatting with you, how long do you spend thinking about their quit or judging their quit? You probably have to, make dinner, do your own work, get ready for bed, go exercise, read, wash the dishes, whatever 10,000 other things you have to concern yourself with. Are you just going to sit on the couch and ruminate about, wow, not sure that was the best decision, that quit? Probably not. And at this point, you'll probably see where I'm going with this. No matter what your decision is to quit or not quit, and no matter what somebody else may or may not think about it, they're probably not thinking about it for that long. Everybody sits there thinking that the rest of the world is focused on judging them, when the rest of the world is focused on thinking that everybody else is judging them, / not actually judging you because they've got their own things to take care of. And this is I'm not above this thought. Everybody has this thought. I've put on some shoes and some socks today that don't match. Every person walking by me is going to be thinking, nobody cares. If they care, they will notice for a second and then go on about their day. Everybody is very naturally wrapped up in ourselves, not out of some kind of egocentric narcissism, but we all have our own things to take care of. We have to go to work. We have to pay the bills. We have to feed ourselves. And some of us have to feed a family, etc. What other people are doing with their lives, short of the celebrity gossip that people watch on E! Or whatever else, is rarely of consequence to anybody else. So why would you let what they could possibly think about your quit affect whether or not you quit, or whether or not you judge yourself harshly for that quit? So that's the first fear I'd like to address. Realize that if that is at all stopping you from making a change in your life, stop and evaluate, will what the other person think have any effect on me? Now, there are some isolated instances where it may. We're talking about you have a life partner of some sort, a spouse, or maybe you're living with a parent who, if you make a quit they don't like, they may say, hey, you're out on the street. That's a very specific situation. And I will never say that any of my advice applies to 100% of all situations. But the majority of times, the people out in the ether that you're thinking about, who you fear will judge your quit, either will not judge your quit, will judge it more favorably than you think, or if they judge it negatively, that will have no effect on you. And they'll forget about it 3 seconds later, even if they did judge you negatively. So please do not let that keep you stuck in any type of situation. Second fear I'd like to address. The fear that quitting is somehow equivalent to failure. So, what is failure? Failure is technically when you had a goal and you did not achieve it. However, this is very much forgetting that life is about the journey. I even heard Tim Ferriss mention this on a podcast he did the other day. Whether or not you achieve that ultimate goal, have you failed if you learned something along the way? And his argument is, no, if you got anything out of that experience, maybe you didn't get what your ultimate goal was prior to leaving that experience. But there's no failure if you learned from it, if you got tools or skills that you can use in the next experience. And I completely agree. That's one thing about quitting versus failure. It's that failure assumes that there's only one goal. I started a company and I want to make $1 million. And along the way, nothing else matters. I am a failure if I did not make that $1 million. Well, that is a very black and white way to look at things, and one that's probably not going to serve you that well. Because say you get to 999,000, it's really hard to say you failed, and you probably learned a ton of things along the way. So if for some reason, you're a few dollars short of your goal and you have to get out, technically, did you fail? According to your definition, but not according to mine. So in quitting, a lot of it is just changing your mindset. And I would encourage that to be one place that you change your mindset about what is a failure. Another way to look at it is that say you are in a job and you end up getting fired from that job because it's not going well. That could be seen as a failure. And in that situation, if you're in that job and things aren't going well and you don't like it and you're not performing well and you wish you could quit, there's a point at which you still have the option before you get fired to realize this job is not serving you. Generally, if you're not doing well in a job, it's because it's not right for you. Rarely are you really well suited for a job and suddenly get fired because your quality is poor. That's not generally how things work out. So if you're in a job that isn't working for you and you feel like you're climbing this uphill battle and your boss is always on you because you're always doing something wrong, and eventually you think like, man, I'm about to get fired. I just cannot please my boss. At that point, realize that quitting is you having the power. Quitting is a choice. Failing is when someone else has the power and someone else makes the choice for you. So there's a big difference between quitting and failing. And again, nobody says that you have to judge yourself for failing or label anything you've ever done as a failure. But I know a lot of people have this stigma that quitting is a form of failing. And I just want to show those two different mindset shifts in ways that you can kind of separate that out. Quitting is not a failure. All right, next fear. And this is a big one that I love to address. What about the fear that you wasted time or money, or both? Before we address the fear, I want to address what often can come from that fear. Generally, if we think, okay, I don't want to leave something, I've already dedicated a lot of time or money into it, what does that lead to? Dedicating more time and more money into it, which almost never has a great outcome. Let me give a very basic example. Food. You go to an expensive restaurant. You've ordered the $50 steak. You've gotten halfway through the steak. You are super full. Now, you have a decision to make. Do you finish the steak or do you leave the steak? Let's pretend it's not a steak. Let's pretend it's sushi or something that will not be heated up well the next day. We'll keep calling it a steak though. So your options are throw it away or finish it. Now, you know you've been there where you say, but I've already spent $50 on this steak. Sometimes in life, that leads you to do things like finish it because you feel guilty about that money you spent. But whether or not you finish the steak, that money isn't coming back. In fact, if you finish the steak, you just get a stomach ache and the need for an extra 20, 30 minutes at the gym. You don't get your money back. And a lot of us need to realize that that same thing applies to school or jobs or relationships. From my own life, I went to graduate school in multimedia. It was supposed to be a 2-year program. I finished 1 year. I had paid for the entire year. I had spent a year's worth of time in this program. And I realized I no longer wanted to do multimedia. I wanted to shift and try to go to medical school. I had a decision to make. What about all the time and money I've already spent trying to get a graduate degree? Did I want to spend double that time and double that money to get a degree I decided I didn't want? I already knew multimedia wasn't for me. What would be the point of then throwing down more money toward my education, spending more nights at school, if that's not what I wanted in the first place? Same thing with relationships. People say, oh, I don't want to leave. We've been together, 3 years, 5 years. But if the only reason you're staying is because of the time you already dedicated to this relationship, why would you want to dedicate more time? If there's nothing fulfilling left about the relationship, why would you dedicate more of your years to it? This is called the sunk cost fallacy. That time you spent, that money you spent, those are sunk costs. You are not getting them back. They do not have little life preservers. They're not coming back. They have been sunk, and you need to just move on and do not concern yourself with them. Do not tether yourself to those things that are sinking. You want to float. You want to fly. Get out of whatever that was sinking you. Then the second step is realizing that whatever time and money you spent wasn't actually wasted. Now, we'll use my graduate school as an example. Do I have a graduate degree in multimedia? I do not. Did I learn along the way that I did not enjoy the things involved with being a multimedia designer? Yes. That lesson alone was huge in shaping the rest of my career choices. I decided to go into medicine instead, and later down the road, different multimedia opportunities have presented themselves, and I would think back to then and think, no, I know that this is not a path I want to take. I've been there before. I didn't enjoy it then. Let's not go down that road again. And that's all it takes for you to realize something, no matter how much time or money you spent on it, is not a waste. You simply have to have learned from it, even if the only thing you learned was that it's something you don't want to do in the future, because that is super valuable information. There's a plethora of things out there, but it takes going through several options and whittling it down to the things that you really truly enjoy to be able to carve out a life and a career path that puts you at your optimal self. Now, the last fear we're going to go over is the fear that quitters never win and winners never quit. Now, from the intro to this podcast, you've probably figured out that is my least favorite phrase. It keeps people so stuck. It leads to so much stigma. Everybody who said that, I realize they had the best of intentions, but the result is not necessarily great because it really only applies in sports and other situations like that. Because, if you're running a marathon, the only way to finish that marathon and win the marathon, yes, is to not quit that marathon. However, in life, it does not apply in the majority of situations. Let's look at some examples. Think about Bill Gates, who quit Harvard, or Mark Zuckerberg, who also quit Harvard. The fact that I don't have to explain who either of these men are is a pretty good indicator that they're probably winners, because that kind of name notoriety either comes from being a winner or a serial killer. Now, on the other hand, think about the archetype of the 1950s dad who goes to work for a company right out of college, gives them 40 years of his life, and then retires. Never quits. With the exception of people who move up the ladder, a lot of people staying in the same job for 40 years don't quit, but they also don't evolve. So you've got on one hand some quitters that are pretty big winners and some people who never quit that I'm fairly certain there's nothing winning about staying in the same job for 40 years. If you love it, fantastic. But you and I both know plenty of people who are just counting down the years till their retirement kicks in, because that's what they're there for. I've got to put in my amount of years, then I'll get my retirement. It's not that they're waking up with joy that they get to go to this job. And let's be honest, if we all had our choice, we would want to wake up and joyfully head off to work, right? So if there's an opportunity for you to quit something that you're not enjoying and move on to something you are enjoying, how in the world would that make you not a winner? I'm fairly certain it would absolutely make you a winner in the game of life. And this whole winners never quit, quitters never win thing would be a distant memory. So if that's a fear you have, please just look at the examples everywhere. They're winning on multiple levels. Bill Gates is eradicating polio throughout the world. That's a huge win from a quitter. If he can quit and win, so can you, my friends. So for this 13th episode, let's celebrate working through all the quitting associated fears. I am here with you on the journey. I still go through quitting associated fears all the time. I just have learned some tips and tricks to get through them a little faster than when I first started quitting, but I would love to pass them along to you. If you have any quitting associated fears that I haven't addressed, and I know there are many, I just scratched the surface, I would love for you to send me a message. You can go to my website, quittingbydesign.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook or Instagram, Quitting by Design. You can tweet at me at lmorski, L-M-O-R-S-K-I, whatever means you'd like to get to me to ask me your questions, give me some other questions you'd like me to address on future podcasts or future Facebook Lives. I would love to hear from you. So from me to you, happy 13th episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Quit Happens podcast for these last 12 episodes. And until next time, happy quitting.